The literal meaning of the word obsession is a fixation or consumption with belief and desire. Everyone is obsessed with something. It could be anything from a color to a particular food, how you take your coffee, or the way you dress. But what happens when someone becomes obsessed, not with a thing, but with a person? In Ohio, 29-year-old Morgan Fox was a single mother, girlfriend, and hardworking woman. She worked at FedEx as an operations manager, and her life was going pretty well. But when her boyfriend of 1 year found Morgan lifeless in her car outside of their home, the police didn't know where to look for the killer. Morgan, on the outside, didn't have any enemies, and she was loved by each and every person she knew. But there was someone in the background who fancied her a lot and wanted her all for themselves. And even though there were subtle signs here and there, no one ever imagined that the situation could escalate to murder. The case of Morgan Fox is confusing, and it's wrapped in mystery and will leave you second-guessing every single interaction you've had with anyone, whether it be a person on the street or the very person you work with. Welcome to True Crime Stories. If this is your first time here, I'm your host, Ty Knotts. Here at True Crime Stories, we do things a little bit differently. We upload new true crime documentaries each week. No AI narrations, no overblown drama, just true crime. So if you're into that kind of thing, well, and if you're watching this video, you probably are, then hit subscribe. It's totally free and keeps you up to date with all of my future videos. Morgan Ashley Fox was born on August 22nd, 1991, to parents Cindy and Bob Fox in Marion County, Ohio. The Fox family is huge, and Morgan was one of 13 siblings. Morgan, from the get-go, was a very obedient child. She excelled in school and mingled with nearly everyone. From a young age, Morgan also got along well with others, and she was amazing as both a daughter and a sibling. When Morgan was still a teenager, she met and started a relationship with a fellow teenage boy, and soon the two found out they were expecting a child. Now, while some may feel overwhelmed by this news, Morgan welcomed this new phase of her life with nothing but a smile on her face and a heart brimming with joy. 9 months later, the couple welcomed a healthy baby girl who they named Amelia, affectionately known as M. Morgan, at the time of her pregnancy and her baby's birth, was fresh out of high school, and because of shouldering the responsibility of being a new young parent, she felt she was unable to attend college, but that didn't stop her from trying to provide for her daughter. Morgan took a job at FedEx shortly after, and there she steadily climbed the ladder, and at the time of the case, she was a manager of operations. At some point during this major transition in her life, Morgan and the father of her baby also broke up, meaning Morgan was now officially a single mother. Fast forward to July of 2019, and Morgan had met Jason Scarnecchia, who was a fellow coworker at FedEx. Jason was also a single parent at the time, and he had a young daughter close to M's age, so the two hit it off. They started dating the following month, and less than a year later, in July of 2020, Morgan, Jason, and their daughters moved into a house on Fraser Avenue in Plain Township in Ohio, on a 1-year lease. This is also the place where the rest of this case takes place. Now, this place is purely a residential area, with houses, greenery, and the normal hustle and bustle of suburbia. Both Morgan and Jason felt that it was the perfect place for them to raise their kids, and they were on the brink of starting their new lives together as a blended family. But Morgan and Jason's relationship was not perfect by any means. Now, the couple had their usual fights, but they also made up quickly, and they both adored and supported each other. Morgan and Jason's relationship was very complex, though. Blended families can be tricky, and finding common ground can be hard, but not entirely impossible. So you can probably get why the couple was going through a rough patch from time to time. Well, according to Jason, at the time of the case, they were working through their differences and were finally in a peaceful and happy place in their relationship. But things came to a screeching halt on the rainy morning of October 28th of 2020, the day that their lives would change forever. It was an early start to the day for Morgan on October 28th. She mostly worked the early morning shift, and she was getting ready for work. She woke up at 1 a.m., went downstairs, fixed herself some breakfast, and got ready and left the house to get into her car and drive to work. Around 6 a.m., Morgan's boyfriend woke up for his shift and was expecting her to be gone. But when Jason looked out of the window facing the driveway, he saw that Morgan's car was still there. It was dark, so Jason couldn't make anything out of the window, so he called Morgan on her cell phone as he went out to inspect. But as he approached closer, he heard Morgan's phone, and the sound was coming from somewhere near the car. As Jason reached the car, he was met with a horrific scene. A motionless Morgan was slouched in the driver's seat, with her legs dangling out of the car. The car door was slightly open, and horrifically, Morgan had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Jason could barely even process what was going on. He could only call out Morgan's name over and over, and on autopilot, he checked her pulse, and unfortunately, there was none. This seemed to snap Jason out of the state of shock that he was in, and he called 911 while taking in his surroundings. It was still rainy when the investigators arrived, but they noticed skid marks on the wet, muddy curb right by Morgan's car, and there were also mud splashes on the nearby fence of the house. This indicated that whoever attacked Morgan had made a run for it in their car. Her phone lay idle on the ground, her purse was still with her, and nothing was stolen. There were no bullet casings on the ground either, and all of this hinted at the fact that Morgan's attacker was not a robber, and that they had intentions of ending Morgan's life, and they even tried to cover their tracks. Morgan's body was taken away as the police launched an investigation immediately. This was a very confusing situation, and the only thing the detectives had to go off of was Morgan's phone. They were hoping to find any clues or leads as to what might have happened to Morgan. When Morgan's parents got to know about her daughter's tragic passing, they were understandably inconsolable. Morgan's mom, Cynthia, had just talked to her on the phone a day prior, and now Morgan was no longer alive. This was nothing less than a punch to the gut for Morgan's family. Everyone demanded answers. Who could have done this? What was the reason? Well, the police had to start somewhere, and they had their eyes on none other than Morgan's boyfriend, Jason. See, Jason's call to 911 was the main subject of interest for the police. On the call, Jason was calm and composed, and sounded just marginally frantic. This, to the police, was suspicious. Add to that the fights the couple was having, and him being the only person with Morgan at the time of the attack, and the police's suspicion grew even more. But when Jason was interviewed and investigators talked to him, everything pointed towards the opposite. Also, his hands were checked for gunpowder residue, and that was also cleared. During questioning, Jason was also very emotional and devastated by Morgan's death, but he still tried his best to cooperate. By then, the detectives knew that Jason probably had nothing to do with Morgan's passing. But if not Jason, then who was it? Well, that was when Morgan's phone was checked. The investigators combed through a list of calls, messages, and every interaction, but one message in particular stood out to the police. It was a message sent by Morgan to her boyfriend, Jason, on October 8th, and the contents were something along the lines of Morgan being upset over some male colleagues at work who went through pictures on her phone without her permission. When the police asked Jason about this message, he corroborated this occurrence by saying that Morgan was having some problems with a couple of male colleagues at work because of this situation. Well, the investigators had no choice but to head to FedEx, the place where Morgan worked, and question those male colleagues. And little did the detectives know, they were about to open a whole new can of worms. The police spoke to the manager of FedEx, and it was confirmed that Morgan had a distasteful experience with the 3 men, and the investigators wasted no time in looking further into them. Upon inspection of their worker profiles, one man stood out to police, and they had an inkling there was definitely something fishy about this man. But how did the investigators come to this conclusion? Well, that's because this coworker in particular received a warning at work for harassing another employee. He was a 29-year-old man, Jason McDermitt. We don't know much about Jason himself, and I know this is a little confusing since Morgan's current boyfriend is also named Jason, but just bear with me. We only know that he was living in Jackson Township and that he worked with Morgan at FedEx. According to coworkers, Jason was oddly fixated on Morgan, although Morgan only thought of this particular Jason as a friend, but he obviously wanted more. Not only this, after the phone incident, Jason went on to write an apology letter to Morgan, and that was when he received a verbal warning and was threatened with termination if he kept this behavior up. Now, I know this may sound a bit crazy considering the guy was just trying to apologize, but keep in mind, we don't know the contents of this letter. His apology, well, sometimes apologies aren't all they're cracked up to be. So what really happened? Well, it all started about a year prior to Morgan's death, when Jason McDermitt met Morgan for the first time, and he was instantly attracted to her. He'd bring Morgan breakfast at work, and she'd be thankful to him, and they chatted occasionally. The detectives figured out from the texts that Morgan simply viewed Jason as a friend, although he had a hard time getting this message. Everything was going well, and Morgan even invited Jason and other coworkers to a gathering at her house out of courtesy, just for the sake of being polite. But people around Morgan sensed something really weird about Jason. Have you ever met those people who purposefully try to worm their way into a conversation and make a show of knowing your family just as well as you do? Well, that was Jason's behavior at this gathering. He would go out of his way to try to impress the guests, mingle with them, and at one point, he even addressed Morgan's grandmother as grandma, which is downright strange. Now, even at this point, nothing was super alarming until October 8th, when Morgan left her phone unattended at work. It was Jason McDermitt who snatched her phone, punched in her password, and began scrolling through her private photos. But how did he know the password to her phone? Well, no one really knows. But anyway, Jason got into Morgan's phone. He violated her privacy by looking at and saving her intimate photos, then showed them to two other coworkers, which is just a different level of disgusting. Morgan, not long after, saw the whole thing and confronted Jason and the other two men, accusing them of violating her privacy. Even though Jason did give Morgan her phone back and apologized, this incident completely changed Morgan's behavior towards Jason, and rightfully so. She became withdrawn, and her responses to Jason were small, short, and to the point. As far as Morgan was concerned, she thought that this was the end of their friendship, and there wasn't going to be any other interaction between them other than at work. But she got a text from none other than Jason McDermitt on October 24th, 4 days before the attack on Morgan, and he asked her, quote, "How is Columbus going?" Now, for a bit of context, Morgan was visiting her family who lived in Columbus, Ohio, and no one knew who she was with at that time, especially not Jason, since they weren't on friendly terms anymore. But Morgan was left feeling uneasy as to how he knew where she was. She replied, "How do you even know about that?" When the police viewed all of these messages and talked to other coworkers, they knew that Jason was obsessing over Morgan, and even went as far as to stalk her. Moreover, on October 28th, after Morgan had been attacked, Jason arrived at work a little later than usual. At around 2:58 a.m., he came in through the back door, and then he left later on at 10 a.m. According to coworkers, he was acting normally, but detectives couldn't shake the feeling that he may have been hiding something, so they called him in for an interview. During the interview, Jason was forthcoming. He denied having romantic feelings for Morgan and viewed her only as a friend. But he did say at one point that he felt as though he may have been in love with Morgan. But after sleeping on that thought for a bit, he claimed that he wasn't actually romantically attracted to her. The detectives straight up asked Jason whether he shot Morgan that night or not, and he flat out denied it, and even gave up his phone for the police to go through. When the investigators checked the phone's location, well, they hit a dead end. Jason's phone was at home on the evening of October 27th, till 2:48 a.m. on October 28th. Now, this information couldn't pin Jason at the crime scene, but it could indicate Jason's thought process and planning beforehand. Maybe he knew that his phone would be tracked, so he deliberately decided to leave it at home so that there wouldn't be any suspicion, which is even scarier if you think about it. The police decided to look into Jason further because something just wasn't adding up. And that was when they found yet another weird thing. See, before Jason was brought in for questioning, the investigators were led to his parents' house where Jason was, and there they saw Jason's car. It had been freshly washed. Now, this wouldn't be weird if it weren't for the fact that it had been raining all day. Why wash your car when it's raining? Unless it was to remove any possible evidence. When Jason was asked about washing his car, he said that he took it to a nearby car wash after his shift on October 28th. When the police viewed the CCTV footage, sure enough, Jason could be seen washing his car, especially the back tires, even going back twice to get them fully clean. The detectives thought that this was very odd. Add to that Jason was seen leaving the car wash and parking in front of a nearby store, but he didn't go into the store. Rather, he was seen inspecting his car in front of the store for minutes, looking side to side as if ensuring there wasn't anything left on his car. Well, remember the tire marks that were found near Morgan's car? Well, those were the exact same marks that Jason's car would have left. And the smoking gun was the CCTV footage from the night of the attack. See, a traffic camera caught a vehicle matching Jason's car driving in the direction of Morgan's house at around 1:38 a.m. And sometime later, at around 2:17 a.m., the car was seen going back in the direction from where it came. This time window is thought to be when Morgan sadly lost her life. Throughout the investigation, the investigators also talked to Jason's friends, and they all said the same thing. Jason was borderline obsessed with Morgan, and he was trying hard to get Morgan to talk to him again. Another very twisted thing about this case was that Jason attended a vigil held next to Morgan's house after her passing. Not only this, but he also went on to write a long post addressed to Morgan on Facebook, and even did this while he was being investigated by the police. In the post, he referred to Morgan as Foxy, and it was basically a creepy thank you letter / memorialization. The post also included a picture of Morgan with the hashtag Justice for Morgan. This post left a bad taste in everyone's mouths, especially Morgan's family. Morgan's stepsister, Megan Barrett, described Jason as a really sick person, somebody who's really messed up in the head and likes to see people in pain. Jason's phone data report also came out, and it contained hundreds of deleted pictures of Morgan, some more intimate than others. And what was so creepy is that there were numerous videos of Morgan as well. By viewing these videos, you could tell that Morgan was unaware of being recorded. This meant that Jason was secretly and inappropriately recording videos of Morgan at work, which is just so frightening and disgusting. The investigators knew Jason was behind Morgan's attack and her death, but now they just needed to prove it. Within a week of Morgan getting attacked and killed in front of her house, the police arrested Jason McDermitt on November 5th of 2020, and he was charged with aggravated murder and menacing by stalking. He was held at Stark County Jail with a $2 million bond. The only thing that was missing was the murder weapon, which the police couldn't find. But Jason's dad actually had an extensive weapon collection, so I'll leave it to you to figure out how Jason could have got his hands on one. This was all the evidence they needed to finally pin Jason for the crime. Soon, the trial began in Stark County Common Pleas Court, and according to investigators, this is what they believed happened on the fateful night of October 28th. Jason knew Morgan's work schedule and was very upset with her cold and aloof attitude towards him, even though he's the one that caused her to have this attitude towards him in the first place. But Jason wanted Morgan to talk to him again, and possibly be something more than just friends. And when Morgan started drifting away, Jason couldn't take it anymore. He went to her house before 2 a.m., waited for her to emerge from her front door and get into her car, then fired at her twice and left her for dead. Afterwards, he came to work and went about his day normally, and then left work at 10 a.m., after which he washed his car thoroughly to get rid of any mud on the tires. It's believed that he proceeded to delete Morgan's pictures and videos from the phone around this same time, too. Jason's defense, on the other hand, stressed that he was being wrongfully accused of the murder, as well as cell phone data and geolocation data that didn't place him at the crime scene. The defense said that it was the other two co-workers who took Morgan's phone, and Jason was actually the one that tried to stop them from violating Morgan's privacy. The jury deliberated, and the verdict was passed on April 8th of 2021. Jason was found guilty of murdering Morgan Fox, and on April 4th of 2021, Jason was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Before the sentencing, Morgan's family made victim impact statements, and among Morgan's parents, her 9-year-old daughter Amelia also took the stand. A child who had just lost her mother was so brave to take the stand and look into the eyes of the very person who was responsible for her mother's passing. It's both heartbreaking and so admirable. Amelia's statement that she wrote herself moved everyone to tears, and even Jason, for the first time since he was arrested, showed emotion. Amelia went on to say, "I thought monsters weren't real, but you proved me wrong. You hurt so many people. You hurt me and the people I love." Morgan's dad, Bob, also took the stand and made a tear-jerking statement in which he said, quote, "I'll never get my daughter back. I miss her so much and I love her so much, and I'm going to struggle for the rest of my life. So may you do the same. May you rot in hell, Jason McDermitt." After Jason's trial, the Fox family also reached a $4 million settlement with FedEx, out of which $1.2 million will be given to the attorneys who represented the settlement. $2 million will be placed in a trust for Amelia's future, and the rest will be split amongst the Fox family members, including her parents. But ultimately, money means nothing in situations like this. $4 million isn't even enough money to cause FedEx to flinch. Morgan was more than just a mother and a daughter. She was the source of joy in her family's life. With Jason's monumental and devastating actions, a child was robbed of her mother. Amelia, a little girl who only has a vague idea about loss and passing, has to grow up, graduate high school, go to college, and start her own life without her mom being by her side. Amelia can never run through the front door and head straight for Morgan and tell her about her day. The Fox family also founded the Morgan Ashley Fox Foundation, that mainly raises its voice on prompt actions against workplace assaults and harassment, and provides a platform to speak up and make a change in society. I can only hope that Amelia and the rest of the Fox family find a way to move on in peace. Even though they can never really forget how Morgan was taken away from them, they can hopefully find some form of peace knowing that the perpetrator, the monster behind their loss, is paying the price by spending the remainder of his life in prison. This case was terrifying, and it really shows that people harboring unhealthy obsessions towards someone can do the unthinkable. It's so hard to wrap your head around the fact that people can be capable of such unfathomable crimes, and they can hurt other people just because they don't feel the same way as them. And sometimes this very difference in opinion can become the catalyst for something irreversible and horrific. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. I wanted to give a special thank you to a couple channel members, including Aileen Bass and Aria. If you also want to become a member of the channel, you'll gain access to new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're uploaded to the public. It's currently the best way you can support the channel and help out. I really appreciate all of you that have decided to do that. And if you want to join, you can click the big join button below the video or find the link down in the description. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, check out this other interesting case I covered, and don't forget to subscribe. It's totally free and keeps you up to date with all of my future videos. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.